Okay, so we are back, and I'm going to talk about memory in this segment. And something I addressed in a previous, when I was talking about infancy, was childhood amnesia. So, most people, when asked, "What is your earliest memory?" will, and by people I mean adults, will offer something from age 3 or later. Most people cannot really remember anything prior to that age. Some people, it's closer to 4, and some people it'll be even later. Some people, it's 8. It's really common to have really sketchy, imprecise. I'm not even sure if this really happened. Kinds of memories for our childhoods. Sometimes people think that that's a sign of pathology. It it's a sign of, it's kind of normal for most of us. Now, some people who have had traumatic things in their childhood will have whole blocks of time that they've repressed, like whole periods of things that they can't remember, um, things like that. But I think it might be reassuring to find out that even people who don't have any known traumas in their past or whatever have sketchy memories too. That it's really common for us as little kids to only remember big, dramatic, maybe traumatic events, and the rest of the day to day things just are gone. I mean, if you think about it as an adult, the day to day stuff you don't really remember very well either. I mean, it's one of the symptoms of Alzheimer's to not be able to remember what you had for dinner last night, but to be able to remember, what you had for dinner at your wedding 50 years ago. I mean, that's true, but that's a really big oversimplification because, I mean, what did you have for dinner last night? I know for me, I made dinner last night. I'm still having to kind of go back and say, what did I make? I have subsequently remembered. I now know what we had. But it's really common to have these mundane daily things be hard to remember for all of us. And it's particularly true for children. If you think about a child's day, an hour in a child's mind is way longer than an hour in an adult's mind. And so many things happen, so many thoughts happen. I mean, so much fantasy is going on. It's not really that surprising that children don't really remember much. But let's explain why they don't remember much. Freud says it's because we repressed it. He said so many awful things happened to us during that phase. We got potty trained. Oh, the indignity. Oh, before that, we got weaned. Oh my gosh, we wanted to nurse from our moms for the rest of our lives. We wanted to suck on that pacifier for the rest of our lives. And we had to, be deprived of it. And that was traumatic. And so we repressed it because we didn't want to have to face that trauma. And even before we got weaned, we went through the birth process. That had to be awful. And so, yeah, he said we could remember all that stuff, but we don't want to. And so it's all been placed into an unconscious, inaccessible place. Piaget says we can't remember things from early childhood because we don't think like children anymore. When we make that transition from sensory motor and into pre-operational, and then from pre-operational into concrete operational, each time we're making these transitions, we're having big jumps in how we think. And it's like, trying to put a, I'm going to give an example that a lot of you are like, what are you talking about? Like a Betamax tape into a VHS player. Like it just doesn't fit. We don't think like that anymore. So let me give you an analogy that maybe you guys would recognize. You're trying to put a CD into a laptop that doesn't have a CD-ROM drive. Maybe that, I don't know. So we just don't think like that anymore, and so it's not accessible. Information processing says it's in the wrong format. When we were kids, a lot of our memories were stored without language. They were stored visually, auditorily, smell-based, things like that. And so once we started learning language, we started encoding things in a language-based way, and we search for information in a language-based way. And the one thing that really supports that is research on people's ability to remember pictures versus their ability to remember words that describe those same pictures. People are much better at remembering pictures, but the problem is you have to give them proper cues or else they cannot reveal that they know the picture. Because if they can't think of the words that would describe the picture, how would they let you know that they have that picture in their memory? So you have to do like recognition tests or things like that to get them to reveal that they actually do have that picture in their memory. And so probably it's like that for little kids. They have some picture-based memories, but they don't know how to get it out and put it into a verbal, language-based kind of description. So it's a wrong formatting, according to the information processing model. Children in this 2 to 6 period, and really honestly probably more like the 4 to 6 year old period, start to display some meta memory. Meta means awareness. So in this case, it's awareness about their own memories. And so they start to understand some basic memory processes. They start to understand that if you want to remember something, you might have to try. You might have to do things to make that thing memorable. They're aware that sometimes they forget stuff, that they used to know it and now they've forgotten it. They might use memory aids, like tell their mom, don't forget I have to bring something to class tomorrow, to kindergarten tomorrow, or remind me when my favorite TV show comes on, or something like that. Or they might tie a finger around their string, a string around their finger. What I just did is called a Spoonerism, when you invert the words in a sentence or you invert the first letters of two words. So I inverted the words in a sentence. A string around your finger is what I meant to say. A lot of times kids who will use that little memory aid will be asked later, why do you have a string around your finger? And they'll be like, I forgot. Oh, it's like in Harry Potter when Neville had a remember all and it was red, indicating he had forgotten something, but he doesn't remember what it was, so it's not helping him at all. Really common for kids to start to try and use these kinds of memory aids to help them. They are aware that if you try and get them to remember a lot of things, they're going to have a high probability of forgetting it. Whereas if you just give them a couple of things to remember, that they're going to do better. They're aware of that. Like if you say, okay, I'm going to give you a list of words. I studied little kids when I was working on my master's degree and their memory for word lists. And it was only 12 words. It wasn't long. And I'd get past word 3 and they'd be like, oh, I can't remember that many. And they wouldn't even listen to the rest of the list. They're like, I can't. Some kids would do that. Other kids wouldn't. Others would dutifully listen to the whole list and remember 3 words. But some of them had enough meta memory to say, you've exceeded my capacity. This isn't going to work. So they start to become aware of these things. I remember, this is going to maybe be a shocking story to you guys from my childhood, which was, in the olden days. My best friend lived on the corner of my street, and I was 3 years old. And now I looked at it on Google Earth, and there was literally 3 houses between us, right? But I lived in a neighborhood, like normal, with sidewalks and street, so there was some danger to be had. And my mom would let me walk down to the neighbor's house. It's possible that she stood on the front lawn and watched me the whole way. I have no idea. I never looked over my shoulder, but she told me, you have to come home at 2. And the first time she told me that, I forgot by the time I got to my friend's house, and my mom had to call over there to get them to send me home. And so she was irritated with me about that. So she said, if you don't remember this time, you're not going to be allowed to go down there anymore. And so I knew it was important. So I walked down the street, and I clearly remember this. This is one of those examples of a memory that stands out because it was a big thing. My mom was trusting me, but she was telling me I'm not going to get to do what I want to do if I don't conform. So I walked down the street, and I remember with every step I was like, 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock, until I got to my friend's house. Her mom opens the door. I go, I got to go home at 2 o'clock, and then just cleared my own memory banks, right? So I used the memory aid of, chanting it the whole way, and then I emptied my memory onto the mom and went about my business. But that's, really common for kids as they're getting older to start being aware. I can forget. What can I do to help myself to not forget? So they'll employ different kinds of recording devices or cues or other people, all the things I've been talking about. So I'm going to wrap up this chapter by talking a little bit about how little kids' memories look different from older kids and so on, and how they use their memory. Categorizing is a common memory strategy, and we can really see this in very young, 2, 3, 4-year-old kids who are really starting to learn the words for different kinds of objects and events and stuff like that. You can tell that they're categorizing because they will use an incorrect word for a new experience or object that's kind of close. Like, for example, they might use the word dog when they see a sheep for the first time. And it shows you that they're recognizing that they both have four legs, they're both covered in some kind of fur, that they have some similarities, right? So you can tell that they're categorizing them. As they grow older, it'll probably get more and more categorized where, the dog might live in the house and the sheep lives in the field, and they start to realize why they are different and why they deserve different names. But initially, that incorrect use of the word really is a flag to all of us that, oh, yeah, see, they're recognizing the similarities. They might not even describe them, but they're putting them into similar categories as evidenced by using the same name. So we see that a lot with little kids. Now, I did a lot of research on list learning, and so I wanted to share with you a little bit of the kinds of strategies that kids use when they're trying to learn a list of words. So with little kids like age 2, any words that they are able to remember from the list tend to be ones that rhyme with each other. That really catches their attention. So there might be a bunch of words on the list, and in amongst it is sun and the word fun, and they'll remember those two words because they rhyme. As they get a little bit older into the age of 3, they start to recognize and remember words based on shared syntax, meaning. And so they might remember that the list contained, two words that go together in their minds, like men working. A little sexist of the 3-year-olds, but they oftentimes make that association, right? That men work. By age 4, you start to see some clustering, like the beginning of these kind of categorization things. So they'll start to remember like different fruits together. And it shows that they recognize that these are maybe fruits or things that I eat all get clustered together. And so they're starting to recognize that kind of pattern. By age 5, they really try hard to recall the words that been presented in the actual order that they were presented, which is not the best memory strategy. If there are rhyming words there, put the rhyming words together. That is actually a better memory strategy. If there are syntactical associations, that's actually a better strategy. You're going to have a better chance of remembering more words. Absolutely, clustering is a way better strategy if there are things that go into the same category. But by 5, they're so dutifully trying to follow the rule, and they're like, you presented it in this order, I have to produce it in that order. And so they may actually have a backslide of how many words they generated at age 5 compared to what they had been able to do at age 4. But it's evidence that they're trying to, follow what they perceive to be the rule, which is the order that the words were presented. So that's kind of funny. So you see this categorizing really start to emerge by the time kids are 12, which is far off for us in the lifespan at this point. But by the time they're age 12, they tend to be doing the same kind of categorizing strategies as college students will do. So the skill set seems to be in place by about age 12 to start seeing the associations of items out in the world. And, some cultures will cluster things based on, what the object is made of, or how it's used, or who uses it, or things like that. Other cultures might use other rules. And so the important thing is the act of categorizing, not what categories they use. So that's the important thing there. So we see that we start to see the burgeoning kind of categorization starting by age 2. By 4 to 6, way more categorizing going on. And then by age 12, way more categorizing. Like with age, it increases. And that helps to make memory better and better, so that by the time we're in adolescence, we're seeing kids functioning at like their max memory capacity, really. That's going to persist through at least the 20s. People will start to see some memory deficits starting by the ages, by the 30s. But for sure, all the way till age 50. So, 12-year-olds don't look that different until, middle life. It's really amazing how efficient memory gets really quickly. All right, that's enough on memory. Let's come back in the next segment. We'll talk about early childhood education.